Episode 11 of The Bad Batch is titled Devil's Deal, and wow, was it spectacular. I know I say this every week, followed by the phrase, this is now my favorite episode, and this time I may actually have it. Or next week, seeing as I believe that this will be a two-part episode. But this episode keeps up with the trend from last week. We're getting to see a bunch of different worlds and how they're being treated by the Empire. Last week, we saw the Empire take control of Raxus, the capital of the Separatist Alliance, but now we're headed back to a familiar planet, Ryloth. We get almost the same type of opening as well, with the leaders of Ryloth telling its people about how the Empire is here to protect them. Except this time they don't seem to mind as much, only because they trust the word of Cham Syndulla. Now, not only do we get to see Cham, we finally get to meet his partner and Hera's mother, Eleni Syndulla. I was really excited to see her and then was instantly filled with dread. Something is going to happen to her and I am not prepared for the heartbreak. That's not the only cameo though, and we got what I personally believe to be the best cameo yet. A young Hera Syndulla and Chopper absolutely stole the show for me this week. The second we saw Eleni, I kept asking myself, are we about to see Hera? And when she popped her head up, I was fist pumping the air. Hera is one of my favorite characters, and Rebels is my favorite animated series, so seeing her really made me love this episode even more. It's not all fun and games on Ryloth though. The whole episode revolves around the demilitarization of Ryloth's people so that the Empire can take control of the planet. More so really to ensure that the Ryloth people do not rebel against the Empire, but clearly we know how well that worked out. What's most interesting though is the involvement of clone Captain Hauser. While there are no Jedi around, he seems to be acting just fine. Even after capturing Hera for being in a restricted area, he tells Cham that I'm kind of in a bind here, make sure it doesn't happen again and I won't report it. That doesn't really sound like the Empire to me. Rex had mentioned in earlier episodes that there are some clones who could resist the inhibitor chip, and I wonder if he's one of them. Obviously, his attachment to the Syndulla family is still there, and his chip hasn't driven those thoughts out of his mind yet. Speaking of clones, let's talk about the Batch. Weirdly enough, the Bad Batch are barely in this episode. They themselves take a backseat to the story and only appear as a cameo. It's a good one for sure though. It felt like it would be an exciting cameo in another Star Wars property, but having it be their own show, it's a bit strange. I still don't hate it though because it gave us a beautiful scene between Hera and Omega while talking about flying. It's such a beautiful moment hearing both of them dream about flying. Omega explains that she is not allowed to fly because Tech won't let her until she's memorized everything about the ship, and Hera says that it's not just about memorization, it's a feeling. It was such a sweet moment and I had a smile going ear to ear throughout. The scene in general though isn't for the best purposes. Cham's freedom fighters are trying to get weapons, seeing as the Empire confiscated every weapon on the planet, which is obviously leading to the freedom fighters' uprising. Ryloth itself is in a tough situation. The planet has started its mining for dunium, which is a precious metal used in the creation of the Death Star, so that's already eerie, but the biggest problem is Orn Free Taa, to where the episode gets its name. The Devil's Deal is between Orn Free Taa and the Empire. Orn is only in this deal with the Empire for his own self-interest and his want to get rid of Cham Syndulla. Both of these play to the Empire's favor as they use his greed to tie up loose ends by having Crosshair assassinate Orn Free Taa and then blame Cham Syndulla for what Rampart calls an attempted assassination. So now the Empire has Orn Free Taa and Cham out of the way, and this is where my dread sits in. This episode ends with Chopper and Hera getting far away from the whole incident that's going down, while Cham and Eleni are arrested by the Empire, and the episode ends on a cliffhanger. Overall, this episode had everything I wanted. We're seeing the early stages of Cham's rebellion against the Empire. We got to see that the Bad Batch were involved in helping arm Ryloth, and we got to see Hera and Chopper. I really think we're going to go back and finish this story before the series comes to its end, and I'm both excited and scared. Eleni is not in Rebels at all, but we don't necessarily know if she dies. We just know that the absence of Eleni drove Hera and Cham apart. I really hope we don't see her die on screen because honestly, I don't think my emotions could handle it. But thankfully, I have some time before next week's episode to prepare myself for what may come. But that's everything I have to say about Devil's Deal. I absolutely loved this episode. I'm really loving all these subtle tie-ins to Star Wars Rebels. Seeing young Caleb Dune in the first episode, and now seeing young Hera. It's all just starting to pull everything together. But what did you think? Did you like this episode? Do you wish we got more involvement from the Bad Batch? And what do you think is going to happen to Eleni? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.